All right. Okay. Excellent. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
At the end, we're going to do a little song, I think, because you are a singer as well.
That's right, I am, yes.
What I'd like to do is talk about. I mean, your career has gone in many directions, but I'd like to focus on horror, and I'm pleased that you're here because I think where people who are into horror, often we talk about directors, we talk about writers, we talk about cinematographers, but we perhaps don't talk about performance enough and the way that actors can help take extreme scenarios, and I think the scenarios in some of your films are extremes, and ground them in some kind of reality and make them work for an audience. So, and in particular, I think I'd like to focus on what I think could be described as your 1970s infection trilogy, beginning with I Drink Your Blood, where you have rabies, the Crazies, where you have a kind of bioweapon infection, and obviously in Shivers, where you have that rather charming parasite taking over. But before we get to that, a question I feel I have to ask you at the beginning: is it true that you accidentally stabbed David Cronenberg during the production of Shivers?
Yes.
Okay. How did he take to that? Could you expand?
Well, it was the scene where I'm making dinner and I've got that fork, and that crazy guy, comes in and he's attacking me and everything, and I don't know why he wasn't there for me to do it, but David stood in for him, and they put this this tiny little pad on David's shoulder, which I'm supposed to, be being attacked and maybe raped, and I'm gonna stab, David. So I missed the pad, and just went right into David's arm. But he was fine. He took it like a man, and then they made the pad bigger.
Okay, so we've established that you've injured at least one director. That's
Yes.
good. Going back a little bit to I Drink Your Blood, which was your first horror film,
Right.
1970, and is what is known as a cult classic, which means can mean all sorts of things. Could you say how you got into horror? Because for a period that you were doing, you're doing a range of other movies, but horror was the theme. How did you get to a point where you were cast in I Drink Your Blood?
Well, I had come to New York City, and I wanted to be a Broadway, actress, and I wanted to do the classics, Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen and, all those wonderful playwrights. But I was working as a waitress, and, this paper came out every Thursday called Backstage, and it had auditions for different movies, low-budget movies, mostly non-union movies. And one of the movies was actually called Phobia at this point. And it was this audition for Phobia. So I got off work and I rushed over there, to the audition. And when I got there, David Durston, the director, who was just a wonderful, incredible, charming man, was packing everything up. And when I walked in, he went, "Oh my God, I've cast the whole film, and you're just gorgeous. I must have you. I must have you." And I was like, "Oh God, here we go." So, but 3 days later, he actually called and he said, "I've cast you in the film. You're going to play a mute, and then I don't have to write any more lines." So I got to do this movie. We went up to Sharon Springs, New York, which was upstate New York. And all of us were staying in this sort of hotel with a Hasidic church and group right across the street from us. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but it's pretty wild. So.
We'll be showing the movie later.
Yes, tomorrow night.
Yeah. It is. I Drink Your Blood is a kind of film that we now term hippie horror. And it's sort of some serious hippies. Was it? When you look at it now. When you comparison with the Crazies and Shivers, which seem quite organised and disciplined, I Drink Your Blood, it's got a lot of energy, but it seems more freeform, shall I say. Was it a kind of an organised production?
Well, David Durston told me that he wrote I Drink Your Blood when he was taking LSD one night. So that can give you an idea of what kind of film it is. It actually was quite organized, but I think that David wanted to give it that chaotic kind of feel, and so there's a lot of really interesting characters in the film, which I think he cast beautifully. I mean, I can't imagine anyone playing the lead hippie guy except Boschkar. I mean, he's just wonderful in the role, and all of the people were really, really great. And the cinematographer, who actually did not get credit in the film, Joe Mangine, who has passed away, he's one of the reasons that the film has lasted so long, because of his lighting and the way that he actually did the DP work. But he had to leave 2 weeks before we finished because he had another commitment, and they were really mad at him, so they didn't give him credit. So even though he's no longer with us, I always like to mention that he actually is responsible for a lot of the reason that this film is still around.
Muteness. That must have been a challenge, playing a character with no backstory and no dialogue, essentially mime.
Yeah, I think I was stoned,
actually. So serious method acting.
Yeah, I mean, really, truly, I think there were sometimes I was stoned. I had never smoked grass before, and so my bio and everything, I think I mentioned that this was really I had had sex before, obviously, but this was my introduction to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I mean, we had incredible. I really don't do this. I'm not telling you to do it, but we did have really amazing weed on the set, which I'd never really smoked before. And every now and then I think it would carry over, since I had no lines and I was supposed to look like I was kind of a mute and out of it. So, and then on our days off we had this amazing. It was called Sunshine Acid, which was this really pure form of acid that, I mean, when you took it, the cows talked to you. That's how strong it was. So it was a very interesting shoot for me. It really changed my whole life.
I'm sure a lot of people now want to see the movie. Moving on to
it's very funny now. But when it first came out in the 70s, it was X-rated for violence. First film ever to be X-rated for violence. But now it's a hoot. I mean, it's just campy and fun, and so I think you'll be laughing a lot, I hope.
And of course, we never find out what happens to your character in the film.
No.
They obviously didn't write that either.
No, I mean...
It's quite nice, because you just disappear.
Yeah, no, I just, I keep wanting them to do a sequel, and, I'm in the woods still, and still stoned, and...
And you never froth at the mouth like the others.
No, David wanted me to always look beautiful. Didn't want me to look, have the shaving cream coming out of my mouth, and so that was our Rabid Foam was shaving cream. So yes, I always, even when I cut the lady's hand. Oh, I'm not going to give it away in case you haven't seen it, but okay, never mind. Scratch that.
Yeah. Moving on to the next infectious disease you acquire in horror, the Crazies, directed by George Romero, whom now we look at as one of the great horror directors. Very, in the sense of someone who seemed to take the genre very seriously, has talked about how he used it to make comments on society, life. Very articulate, very lucid. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because a lot of that is in retrospect. And I just wondered, when you were working with Romero on the Crazies, I mean, did it feel like a different kind of film from a different kind of horror film from I Drink Your Blood, or was it just work again?
I gotta tell you, I never thought anyone would see these movies. I just, I got I Drink Your Blood, I got the Crazies, I got Shivers. No one, I mean, I'd never seen Night of the Living Dead. I didn't know who George Romero was. And David Cronenberg, was no one at that point. And so they were just these films that came along, and I just thought, oh, I'll just do them, and I'll get experience, film experience, which I did. I mean, I got, and it was wonderful. But at the time I was doing them, it was just another job. I mean, however, I have to say that working on the Romero film, it was much more of a sort of a magical situation. I mean, everyone that was on the film was really wanted to make something that would be memorable. And we were all very serious, about that. But it was, it was a low budget film, and we didn't really know. I mean, we had no idea that, over 40 years later, people would still be watching this movie. So it was he was a wonderful director. I think probably my favorite director that I've ever worked with was George Romero. He just had a wonderful insight. And of course, when the film, came out, it was not well accepted because there were no zombies in it, and people wanted, to see zombies, which they do now as well. But but then it was, and I don't think that the American people thought that the military or the government could do anything wrong, at that point. So I think now it's much more accepted, because of course we know now what they can do and have done. So.
And again, your character in that is must have been a challenging one, because from the first moment we see her, she's already been infected.
Yes.
So we never we never know what she was like before that. And again, how do you, as an actor, kind of manage that sense of being constantly spaced out? And weird.
That was one of my fortes.
Yes, right. Okay.
I could just play these sort of crazy, people. I actually tried to not let the audience know in her first entrance that she did have the virus. I was kind of trying to pace it a little bit so that, it came out a little bit gradually, at least, that maybe people wouldn't know how mad she was, until later in the film. But that was the challenging part, was to try to keep it, at that pace and let the audience in little by little by little.
I mean, in terms of performing in horror, I mean, because as I said, you performed in a theatre, TV, you did soap opera for a while.
Yes.
And a whole range of genres. Is acting in a film like The Crazies, is it different? Or is it just acting? Is it the same techniques, or are there any special skills that you need to deal with the kind of scenarios that horror might throw at you?
No, I mean, I think if you sort of have like a gift, which I seem to have always had since I was a little girl. I was very, very shy when I was a child, and I discovered that when I was up in front of people and I could, do things with someone else's words, that I was able to come out of that shell and be another person, and was exciting, and the people really liked it, and so I got approval and attention that way. And so I really wanted to be an actress from very early on, and I studied very hard to learn the technique and the emotional range to be able to do that. But I always, from the time I was 16 years old, I could always play schizophrenic, psychotic women. I don't know why, but I could always do that. So it was just a matter of just, kind of fine-tuning that for whatever character came along, and that's sort of what I did for The Crazies.
And I mean, unlike I Don't Your Breath, we do find out what happens to your character. And we're not showing The Crazies, so we can spoil that one. But it's I think since been seen as quite a lovely little death scene, if there's such a thing as possible, because it is so understated.
Yes, I was crushed because I thought, I'm going to get to die in this movie, and I had never had like a big death scene before. Now I have, so I'm over it now. But then I really wanted to, die and writhe and scream and bleed and anything possible. And George just wanted me to just hear the sound of the shot, turn, look right into the camera, right over it, and just say, "Oh." And I just thought, oh no, that's so lame. And I tried to talk him out of it, and he just, wouldn't hear of it. So, of course, I did, what he asked, and of course he was right, because the thing is, that there's so much has happened before, including the rape. My father rapes me in the film, so you can't follow all of that with something bigger. you have to downplay it. You have to make it something that's innocent and simple and therefore just really poignant and really effective for the audience to see. And so that's what we did.
Shivers. I mean, it's interesting. In the Crazies, you're running around a lot in the fields, I presume outside Pittsburgh, which is where George Romero shot most of his films, and you're running around Sharon Springs, I Drink Your Blood. Shivers is almost entirely inside. It feels much more claustrophobic as a film, and I don't know what it was like to make, but looking at it, it looks like physically quite a challenging role as well. You're in a car crash, you're punched in the face, all sorts of other things are happening to you. I mean, did you come out of it with bruises and scars?
No, you all laugh when I got punched in the face. I heard that. No,
Shame
I mean,
on you.
actually, I was so pissed at Paul Hampton because he was not supposed to hit that barrier with the car the way he did. He was just supposed to bump it. If you saw the thing where our heads came forward in that car thing, that's because he just slammed it into the bumper, and I mean, we almost got whiplash from it, and I was just so mad at him for doing that. It was a challenging film in that Paul and I did not have a lot of chemistry together. And for a long time, I really did not like Paul's performance in the film. I just thought it was kind of bland and and I just thought, well, how could he not be attracted to me? I was this, this hot tomato is after him and he's just always so indifferent, to me. And but later when I saw the film, I realized that actually that was probably Cronenberg's choice, because I don't think Paul would have come up with it, but it was the best choice, and it really did work, really well, and he came across, I mean, because how would you respond or react, in a situation like that? But it was a little bit difficult working with him. He had trouble with lines, and if anyone knows where he is, by the way, we'd love to find him, but no one seems to be able to find him. So if you ever hear where he is, tell him I loved him.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because when I'm sitting there watching the film thinking, you have in a lot of 70s movies, the hero is a complete bastard. And it comes over as someone who is, as you say, not terribly sympathetic.
Yes.
And that wonderful thing where you're trying to get him to kiss you. And at the end, it says when you're lunging out the swimming pool, it's as if, saying, okay, this is what I wanted at the beginning of the movie, you bastard.
Yes, exactly. And interestingly enough, I was not supposed to be in that scene.
Oh.
I was not in the swimming pool scene. And they had actually wrapped me and sent me back to New York. And then, like a week or two later, I got this call from somebody who said, we've thought about it and we'd like to have you in that scene. And I thought, you think? So, they brought me back. And of course, that is my favorite visual of me in any film I've ever done. I just love that moment in the swimming pool when I turn around. It's just such a mixture of sexuality and yet innocence and yet evil, just kind of all wrapped up together. And yes, I just loved giving him the parasite.
Yes. And it's also one of those moments in horror which is very unnerving because you're looking at the camera, which means you're looking directly at the audience. It's like Norman Bates at the end of Psycho or Hannibal Lecter. And it's always that moment where, and I'm astonished when you said that wasn't originally there, because I think that does make that scene. Because everyone else is thrashing about, and again, you're very still and focused and purposeful. And it's almost like this is what the parasite is like.
Yes. Thank you. He got it.
I got it. I did. I love Shivers. I love Shivers. It's I mean, what about that? I mean, because Cronenberg, it was his first feature film. Cronenberg was coming out of avant-garde cinema. He'd made some avant-garde films, and some of the dialogue in Shivers doesn't feel like horror film dialogue. It does feel like avant-garde, and particularly your speech about the eroticism of death. Which is almost like the philosophy of the parasite in some way. I mean, what do you do with it? I mean, how do you play that? Do you just do what the director tells you? Did he contextualize what is a very strange set of lines?
I have no idea what that speech means. I mean, it was very, very strange, and I just think David didn't really direct me a lot in the film because I just think that he cast, really well the characters, and I just tried to make sense of it and to make it seem like she was kind of normal, only saying really, really odd things, so that hopefully when the parasite comes up, which was on my tongue. They put on my tongue. I had to push it out. That parasite did not move. They spent so much money on this parasite, and they had so much trouble with it. They had strings on it and trying to wiggle it and, make it have some life. And so I had a blood pill in my mouth with it on my tongue, and I break the pill, and then I just push it out, with my tongue. So
Because, given that in the film at least, the parasite looks utterly disgusting.
yeah.
But having to have it in your mouth can't have been. And again, you think that's not the kind of experience you get in any other genre, I expect.
No, horror is a very unique genre for sure. I mean, it's you get to scream a lot, and you get to be covered in blood. And actually, I like being the killer the best because you don't have to scream a lot or be covered in blood. But it's a lot. It's more fun for me this time in my career to get to play the mean person and try to give that person some kind of sense and subtext so that the audience will understand in some way why they do what they do.
Of course, the one thing that Cronenberg himself said about the film, he preferred the people after they'd been taken over by the parasite, and that the ending of the film is therefore a happy ending.
Oh yes, I agree.
42nd Street. These films, this is the theme, obviously, of our little festival. And these films have certainly been at home at 42nd Street. You were clearly in New York for at least part of the time of 42nd Street's greatness or disreputability or whatever else you want to call it. Did you have any experiences of 42nd Street itself, or was it an area you avoided like the plague?
42nd Street was a very dangerous area. It was known as Hell's Kitchen. When I was in New York, you did try to avoid it if you could because there was nothing on 42nd Street except porno houses, pimps, and prostitutes. So you didn't want to go there unless you had to. But of course, Broadway was there. So they also had all the Broadway theaters there, which is, such an odd, combination of things. You had to be very careful when in the 70s. If you were a young woman, you couldn't be out after 10 o'clock. Unless you took a taxi, could not walk on the streets, could not go in the park. Oh my God, even in the daytime it was risky to go in the park. Couldn't take a train. That was just absolutely out of the question. I had a few experiences. I was actually on my way to an audition once that was, I think it was on 46th, between like 8th and 9th or something. And this group of, I think there were about 6 Puerto Rican gang members just like circled me. And this has happened to me 2 or 3 times in my life. But I just, for some reason, I get very calm when something like that happens. And I just, the head guy, said, where are you going? Or, something, I said, oh, well, I have an audition for a Coca-Cola commercial, and I'm not sure where it is. I think it's, and so I enlisted their help. And I mean, they just ate it up. They just loved it. And we talked and we walked, and they asked me if I'd seen, any particular shows. And they were just, no one had ever really spoken to them about any of the Broadway shows or talked to them, in any way that made them feel that they were important or intelligent. They walked me all the way to the audition. Oh, and they asked if they could carry my portfolio for me. And so it was like they were like boys, carrying your school books. And they carried my portfolio, and they took me to the building, and they handed it to me, and they told me to just have a really great day and good luck on my audition. So that was a very enlightening experience, and and I just tried to be a little bit more cautious from that point on when I was in that area. But I'm glad I had that moment with them.
That's quite a moment by the sound of it. It's almost as if you were performing a role.
It was, yes.
Your acting skills save you again. Okay, I think we've got time for some questions from the audience, if anyone wants has anything to music. No.
Hello there.
Hi.
I was just wondering, did you find any differences working in the Canadian film industry, the American film industry, and then on a relatively completely independent film in comparison to each other? Things like union rules, health and safety. Were there any sort of differences that spring to mind?
Well, all of the three films I did, the trilogy of Infection, were all non-union films, so they were low-budget, independent films. I have done a few high-budget, Cat People, Fighting Mad was fairly high-budget. The most recent was the remake of The Crazies, which was a $21 million film. The difference that I found is that it doesn't have that sort of wanting to make it a memorable thing for audiences to see 40 years later. It is just a job. I mean, totally. On the Crazies remake, we probably had 100 crew people. Half of just were standing around doing nothing most of the time. You know, they could have cared less about the movie. And you know, in this day and age, you can film it so many times. I mean, you can, you know, do it like 25 times and still not get it. But back in the 70s, we were on 35 mil, so we had to get it. They did not have the money, you know, for you to fool around and not get it like on the second or third take. So the other big difference is that there's so many special effects now in films. And when I did The Crazies, I mean, in the remake of The Crazies, there's like, I don't know, 6 levels of being crazy. And George would just say, you know, to us, okay, you need to be crazier here. You know, and we would act. I mean, we had to act. So I think that that's really the difference, is that independent film is much more loving, much more supportive, much more family-oriented, much more magical. And big budget films, it's just a job for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got a question about Barbara Steele. And I know you're only in one scene with her, really, right at the very end, but I just wondered if you'd got to know her at all and what she was like to work with.
I didn't really get to know Barbara. Well, actually, I know her more now because I've worked with her at some of the conventions. But during Shivers, we were cold because of the pool, and so they were always throwing blankets over us and giving us brandy. So Barbara and I chatted, and we got to know each other, you know, a bit then. But a very funny, you may have heard the story, Susan Petrie had to cry a lot in the film, and she was not a very experienced actress, and she couldn't cry, so she asked David to take her off the set in another room and kind of slap her around to get her to cry, which may be why David turned out to do some of the movies he's made. But and so Barbara, she came onto the scene one day when he was like slapping Susan, and she was pissed. She just read him the riot act, you know, until he explained to her, of course, that Susan had asked him to do it. But she's a lovely lady, and I really did enjoy, you know, getting to drink brandy with her, and still hope maybe one day to work with her.
I've got a quick question for you, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
How are you enjoying your first trip to Wales?
It's great. I mean, the people are wonderful. It's so beautiful here. Oh my God, you're so lucky to live in such a beautiful. I mean, it's breathtaking. You know, where I'm staying is. I mean, there's sheep. You know, you can see sheep and, you know, woods and lakes, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm really enjoying it. I would love to do a film here, a horror film.
Hi.
Hi.
So you've mentioned several horror films and directors you've worked with, like Romero and Cronenberg. Is there any horror filmmaker that you would have liked to have worked with but haven't been able to?
Well, I mean, I would have loved to have worked with, his name has just escaped me. Of course, the director of The Shining. what?
Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, yes, Stanley Kubrick. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with him? Although he wasn't, he did all variety of films, but The Shining's one of my favorite films. And I would love to work with James Wan, who did Insidious and the first Saw film, who's a Facebook friend. So, I keep, sending him little notices, and saying, hi, I'm doing this or that, trying to get his attention. So, that would be great to have worked with him.
Hello.
Hi.
Going from the film we've just watched, it contains a lot of sexual aggression, liberation, and essentially sexually transmitted diseases. Was this used just as a horror aspect, or do you think it was being used as a reflection of the times?
I think that David actually did mean it to be a much deeper film than we all took it to be. There are a lot of layers in the film, which I think is one of the reasons that it has lasted as long as it has. Although we didn't really have a lot of sexually transmitted diseases at that point, and there really was a lot of free love in the 70s. I mean, it was kind of like going to the health club. You just sort of met somebody, you liked him, you had sex. It was really that freedom. But I think maybe he sort of saw what was going to happen in the future, and he added those different layers, to the film.
Hi.
Hi.
Every time I see you in Paul Schrader's Cat People remake, I always think, now there's Paul Schrader giving a little nod to sort of 1970s exploitation because of the movies that you'd made previously. Did those movies influence you getting that role in the Cat People remake?
I don't think Paul Schrader had any idea who I was or any idea of what I had done. I did not like Paul Schrader. I did not like working with him. I'm very happy I'm in the movie because I have singularly made more money on Cat People and the residuals than any other film I've ever made. So it was great to be in it, and plus it's an extremely memorable scene. But he was not very friendly and difficult and very, very, very careless in working with me. I mean, I got really hurt on the film. I mean, I had to come down those stairs first they grabbed my leg to pull it underneath the bed. The cat's supposed to grab my leg and pull it under the bed. So they couldn't get the mechanical cat claw to work. So I kept having to fall on my knee, and then finally they just put a friggin' cat mitt on a crew person, and they got under the bed and grabbed my leg. So my knee was, all messed up and everything. And then I had to fall down the stairs, and they couldn't get it because they wanted me at the bottom, because Paul Schrader has this thing about showing every woman's tits in the movie. So at the bottom of the stairs, I have to flip over and scream, and my bra pops open. They couldn't get the bra to pop. So they had it on strings, and they had it, the crew was pulling it. And I mean, it was just insane. And so every single time I had to go back up at the top and come down again on my stomach. And they didn't take the tacks out the first time I went down, so I got all cut. I was rug burned, bruised, bleeding. It was awful. So I don't like Paul Schrader very much.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone wants to. Oh, here's one down here.
So you said you love The Shining, but is there a horror movie heroine who you wish you had been able to play?
Well, my favorite horror film of all time is The Omen. I just think it's a perfect film, and of course, I love the Lee Remick role in that film. It's very good. I would have liked to have played Marilyn Burns' part in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's a great role and so memorable. And I'm so glad she got away, in that movie. I was rooting for her. And the funny thing about it, I met Marilyn about 3 years ago, and I went up to her and I said, I'm such a huge fan of your movie and everything. And she said, "Oh, that old thing. I just can't believe people still watch that." So it was delightful to get to meet her. And by the way, if I have this new movie that came out in August called Model Hunger, and I play a serial killer, Southern Belle serial killer cannibal, but I'm charming. So, and I'm very funny in it, and extremely violent and brutal. So I think you all might like that.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
You're very welcome. My
Thank you for your career and all the movies that we do still remember, and for all the movies yet to come, I hope.
Fingers crossed.
Please express your appreciation for Lynn Lowry.
Thank you.